We're here today with Maria Lyle and her coach Jamie Bowie. Welcome to both of you.
Hiya, thank you for having me.
Maria is a 100 metre and 200 metre para sprinter. By the age of 14, she was a world record holder and double European champion. Since then, she's won numerous international medals. She came away from the Rio Paralympics with 1 silver and 2 bronze, and last year became double world champion in Dubai. She competes in the T35 para class, which is for athletes with coordination impairments, in Maria's case, cerebral palsy. And Jamie, her coach, is himself an accomplished 400 metre runner, particularly seeing success as part of the GB and Scottish 4x400 metre relay team. In that role, he won silver at the World Indoor Champs in Poland in 2014, and the same year was part of the team that set a new men's 4x100 Scottish record at the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. Sorry, 4x400. Scottish record at the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. So welcome to you both. There's a lot of things to fit into an introduction. We're going to chat to you both, and we'll start out, I think, as we've done with a lot of these, talking to Maria particularly about your earlier days in the sport. And I believe I'm right in saying the first time that you thought running might be for you, you were only about 8 or 9, and it was your mum who was your teacher and had you all doing oblique class. Is that right?
Yeah. So I think I was like primary 4, and a part of the PE lesson was to do the oblique test. Before that, I was pretty rubbish at anything and everything, and I was quite low with my confidence. So when we were told we had to do that, I was dreading it a bit. But no, I just thought, it's fine, I'll just do it. And I actually surprised everyone, including myself, and I managed to complete it and be the last one standing. So that's where my love for like running began. And then from there I joined the local running club and started to compete in disability events, and it's just come from there.
And as you say, that must have been quite a big boost. I'm guessing that both yourself and maybe people in the school had an assumption that you had cerebral palsy, that PE wasn't necessarily going to be your thing, and that suddenly there you are coming up to class. Was that a surprise as well as a boost to your confidence?
Yeah, I think having like a disability, people probably have perceptions of you anyway. So even from when I was in the classroom and stuff, people probably didn't have like the best perception, maybe didn't think I was best at stuff, or I was very good at this or that. So to actually, that was the first time I felt that sense of achievement. So not only did it surprise everyone else, it surprised me, and that was actually the first time I felt, oh, I could be good at something. So that was a good moment for me.
And you mentioned you then went, I think, was it to Dunbar Running Club was the first one that you went to. What do you remember of starting there and of being in this environment where everyone was sporty and doing these things? Was it fun? Were you quite competitive? What kind of things were you doing?
I think it was nice because that was the first time I felt that sense of inclusion, and just being a part of like a running group and joining in the sessions and actually being able to keep up with everyone and just join in and have a good time. So I had a great time at Dunbar when I was younger, and it was a big part of my life then, just like the environment of the club and competing with the club.
And you talk about starting doing disability competition. Where did that come in? Was that something were you even aware of kind of para sports at a young age? Was that one of the coaches that introduced that?
No, it was actually my mum had looked at it. So she had like heard of the Paralympics before, but yeah, it was just because I was from somewhere like, is obviously a lot of the para sport events were based down in England, so it did take, like, my mum had to go out and find these events for me, so that's where it began. And it was more just to try it out and see if it was something I'd like to do. At first I was like cry on the start line all the time because I was so nervous, but once I'd done it, I felt a bit better. And I think just from that experience of competing at like an events like that, I started to get noticed. And my mum and dad would travel up and down the country to all these disability competitions. And I think a good part of that was to try and get noticed, and run the times needed to get some, noticed and supported.
And you mentioned your parents, and I think probably for a lot of athletes at that age, parents are just as much a significant influence as coaches. Was that the case for you? I think they were both quite sporty, is that right?
Yeah, no, both my parents are very keen at keeping fit, and they're both runners and stuff. So I think, a big part of like any like child or young person's sporting career is their parents and getting the support, because you can't get to certain places yourself until you can drive, and even like financial support, like for equipment or whatever it is you compete in, it does play a big part in just having that emotional support as well. It's very important.
And you say you were starting to travel to competitions, and
Mm-hmm.
often when we talk to athletes about the kind of transitional stage as you go through your teens and you go from the junior stage towards being an elite, that's a whole stage in itself. For you, it almost went from playground to elite. You were in probably what's more of a developing sport and a developing discipline, and you were the pioneers and one of the first people sort of competing at this level in this classification. So you were 12 when you ran what would have been a world record. And, as soon as you were old enough, you went straight into the top level of parasport. When that was happening, did it just feel like, well, this is the next thing that we do, it's completely natural? Or were you aware that it was quite an extraordinary achievement to be competing at that level at such a young age?
Yeah, because it's different for parasport in compared to able-bodied sport. Just because there's less numbers of us, you can start competing in the international stage at the age of 14. So it was always like an aim of mine to compete, although I know that's not normal, but it is normal in case of like parasport. So I just took it all in my stride. I knew I could have ran the times to have competed on a senior team. I'm younger than 14, but I just had to be patient, and I think it was a good thing, because obviously, see, being 12 at a Paralympic Games is probably something I don't think I'd have been able to cope with at the time.
And you got your first GB vest then, I think, in 2014, once you were old enough to be classified and to compete at that level, and you got European double gold. And where were you? What was your coaching setup at that point? What were you doing in terms of training, and who were you working with?
So we had to find myself a coach. So at the time I was training with Henry Gray, so that's Guy Lermont's coach, and they were based down at Scottish Borders. So that was like my mum going to have a look to see like who could like help me out, and maybe instead of going from like Dunbar was more of like a fun kind of club to something a little bit more in depth and serious, to try and get my training a bit more specific. So I started off training there.
Grand. And were you aware of your coaching and your training changing as you developed through those sort of teenage years, of the kind of work that you were doing having to change?
Yeah, I think I perhaps maybe rushed it a bit too soon. I kind of went away from that club environment, which I think is important for young people. By the time I didn't see that, I kind of went very specific and was trying to find a coach, and then like trying to get all these like specific training. Whereas I think actually it's important for young athletes to be within like a training group, and it not to be too serious and just enjoying it, but also getting the good work done.
Great. And you also went to London and trained with Ryan Freckleton for a while as well. How much change was that in terms of the surroundings and the group that you were training with, and the general setup? Was that a big adjustment?
It was a huge adjustment. I was training with like people who were in the GB juniors for the able-bodied team, so there were guys running like 10-4, 10-3, and it was crazy like seeing them run. It was a good experience, being down there and learning from Ryan and other athletes. But I was just so young at the time, and perhaps my mental health wasn't at the best place, so I decided I needed to go back home, just because I was quite young, and it was a big, massive environment and a new change for me that perhaps was a bit of a too big a step.
And I guess it's all a learning process, isn't it? You find out what suits you, and maybe what suits you is being based closer to friends and family, and like you say, in that kind of club setup. So you're now with Team East Lothian and working with Jamie. How did that come about? What conversations did you have for that to happen? Did you approach Jamie first of all?
Yeah, so I've always known Jamie through like running, but obviously Jamie, well, I was coaching with other people, was doing his own athletics. So when I came back from living down near London, I was in quite like a bad place just for my mental health and stuff, and I needed, and even just stuff sorting out my training things, like my technique and like on the track and the gym needed worked on. So me and my mum had approached Jamie to ask if he would take me on, and kindly did. So I think it was good for me just to go back to the basics and learn how to run again and lift again and all the important fundamentals you need to be successful.
And Jamie, just to turn to you for a moment, when you first started coaching Maria, what were the challenges for you? You were starting to work with a para athlete and also with someone who was still really quite young, physically still developing, albeit already a lot of success under her belt. What were the things that you did first of all? Did you go away and do some research on cerebral palsy and the physical effects of that? Did you let Maria take the lead? What was your process when you first started to get to know Maria as an athlete who you were coaching?
Yeah, I think so I'd been doing a little bit of coaching, I guess, sort of towards the end of my own career, and then was doing a little bit more coaching once I retired. I think probably the biggest challenge was switching my mindset from coaching probably a little bit more middle distance and 400 to then switching down to 100 and 200. And then I think, it was, I guess, the challenge of trying to understand a little bit like the complexities of cerebral palsy. And I guess, I think that learning journey is still evolving. Like, I think, both probably Maria and I are learning about her impairment and actually how that affects her training. I think probably for Maria as well, she had, when she came back up from down south, she had gone through quite a lot of physical changes and actually probably changed her CP and how that affected her a little bit. So actually it was almost in some ways like a bit of a reset, and you had I think that was just at the start of the world champs in London. So you had quite a serious sort of stress reaction on the shin. So actually the first stage was actually just kind of was a bit more of an extensive rehab program. So sort of after London, you kind of moved back up, and we kind of just started to actually just sort of the first project, if you like, was actually just kind of working out what had caused the injury, how to kind of get everything back to normal, and so that actually Maria was running pain-free. And then I think, sort of after that was actually, I soon kind of learned that actually it was, really important for Maria to find the enjoyment and the fun and, side of the sport again. I think sort of training had been probably taking its toll on her and been a bit monotonous, or not necessarily monotonous, but like it just been, like a lot of stress, and like what Maria had said, sort of her mental health had kind of sort of suffered a little bit during that time. So actually kind of the main focus as well was just bringing some joy back to her sport again.
And we could maybe touch on that anyway, since it both mentioned it, but I know, Maria, you've been quite open talking about your mental health. And particularly in 2018, you were going through a hard time and you sought help, and things have improved. So how did you, the pair of you, talk about that? How did you broach it with Jamie when first things were really difficult? Was it something you were both already aware of? Or was it something you'd kind of kept to yourself and you had to sit down and say, look, I need to talk to you about this?
I think, like, reflecting on it now, is probably something I felt probably as I was beginning from a teenager. It wasn't necessarily running induced. It was probably my feelings about my disability and how people thought of me, and I kind of hid within my running to avoid that. And then I think as I started to ignore these feelings, I felt worse and worse, and then that translated into perhaps maybe not enjoying my running and my training and being desperate to try and be better in my running, which I was actually running okay at the time. I think it was definitely after Commonwealth Games I was really struggling. I think we then started to notice things weren't right, and it was after it was just like a local competition. I broke down in the car and was like, oh, I just feel rubbish and stuff. I actually had to get I think my dad had contacted Jamie actually to tell him what was going on, because I just felt so rubbish I couldn't do it myself. So that's how we have addressed it, and we've been like, I'm quite open and we speak about it all the time. Jamie's quite good at checking up on me, and he also has a chat with my mum and dad, so when we're away he can let them know what's going on as well. So it's good having Jamie there. I think not only he doesn't just see me as an athlete, he sees me as a person, and it's nice to have someone who cares about you as well.
And you've talked a little bit then, Jamie, about how you responded to that and how you had to kind of rethink your approach to coaching. Tell us a bit more. Obviously, just the basic, you say you needed to bring back the joy to Maria's running, and how do you do that? What did you change?
I think, like the first probably bit was really just like trying to understand what like made Maria tick. So, like Maria really likes to kind of like analyze things, sort of like kind of, I guess, likes the sort of science behind things. So I guess like when we were talking about, sort of her training and like some of her, I guess some of the technical things, like that was like really sort of things that she like talking about and trying to understand why that was important, or like why some of our some of this like exercises we do in the gym, why they were important. I think as well at that stage as well, we had quite a close link with, because we were coming sort of back from that injury, sort of quite a close link with the physio as well. So I guess it was kind of like that three-way conversation of like, okay, we need to work on this, we need to address this, because we think this is maybe causing the sort of the stress reaction in the shin. So it was kind of like really looking at technique and trying to make it sort of more efficient and sort of rebuilding a sort of, I guess, around that. And it was just, I guess, sort of chatting about the reasons why and helping Maria understand. And now Maria's doing her uni degree in sort of sports science and coaching. So I guess that, like that's kind of that the parts that she's always been quite interested in. So I always tried to sort of help her understand about her training. So I guess, my philosophy is that, training isn't something that happens to you, it happens with you. So I guess, like I could quite easily say, right, we're going to do this, and then, we go and do the session. But, like actually Maria's not learned anything about that, or any athlete hasn't learned anything about that and doesn't, understand why that session's important and how that fits into the big picture. So sort of I've always, we've always chatted about competition plans together, sort of what races we're going to choose, the timing of the races and why, what we're going to aim for in the year, and kind of always tried to make those joint decisions. I guess you must have been 18, Maria, when I started work, 17, 18.
So yeah, I was 17 at Worlds in 2017, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess in terms of athletics, and I guess when you're sort of at your peak, that's quite far away. But I think the one thing I kind of like learned quite quickly from having seen Maria and known Maria for a while, and then started working with her, is that she's very mature for her age. So actually, having those, I guess, more adult conversations is what some people might say. Like I was handing over a lot of the ownership of the training and the whys and everything else to Maria. So it was like, it was our journey together rather than me sort of showing Maria what to do and her just sort of following the journey.
And I think one of the ways that we can see that there must have been a bit of a change of emphasis is that after the World Champs in Dubai, Maria, you said that your goal really had been to get there and everything else was a bonus. Was that a deliberate change in tactic, instead of focusing purely on podium places, that kind of thing, which, as it turned out, you ended up on top of the podiums? But was there a conscious decision between the two of you to try and change the way you looked at your goals around that event? Perhaps Maria, you could talk about that first.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, like, when I was getting, like, I started seeking counselling just like once I'd like been diagnosed with anxiety and stuff, and something that I felt that I needed to do was probably change my mindset and not being all about, because I was very fixated on times and I always like compare myself, to like how I used to be when I was running really quick. So I just decided, you know what, if I can actually enjoy myself at a championship, that will be good, and then that will reflect onto my running, because before that I'd be absolutely terrified. I wouldn't enjoy myself at all. So actually being at the competition, enjoying myself, was the main goal for me, and we'll see what happens in the race. And luckily it went my way. So.
And did it feed through? Did you notice yourself feeling different at the start line and through the course of the races?
Yeah, just because like before I was just really not, and I wouldn't enjoy it at all. I would just be something I would dread. Is like, oh God, it's race day, I really don't want to do this. Whereas I was actually looking forward to running, which is something that was a big change in me from the last couple of seasons. So
great. And I imagine that one of the big challenges with parasport particularly is that the field can be really fluid. You get people coming in and out of your competitive field. On an Olympic pathway, it varies, but generally you start out with a cohort of people and they're probably going to be your competition all the way through. Whereas with parasport, people can be reclassified. There can be people with acquired disabilities who come into the sport. How do you deal with that? Maria, first of all, and then Jamie perhaps can talk as well in terms of the that you have.
Yeah, no, it's hard, because even from like when I started off, I was number 1 and have like all my world records, and then I got pushed into number 2, then number 3, and I think when you're so obsessed with like being like on top or whatever, I wasn't particularly, but it did kind of hurt when somebody was better and then you couldn't quite replicate their performances. It is hard. And yeah, it can change different, like you get different opportunities. Say sometimes you feel like you've missed out on a medal, sometimes you've not, but it's something that's part and parcel with para sport. It's a shame, but it's something you need to deal with. So making sure you have the right coping strategies for that, and actually realising anybody can turn up, instead of being a bit naive and thinking, oh yeah, this is fine, I'm number 1 now. Anything can change in parasport.
Jamie, is that something that's been a kind of learning curve for you, and that you've had to kind of build into the mindset that you use with coaching Maria?
Yeah, I think it's been a learning journey for me in terms of like parasport. I think like one of the first years working with Maria, I think you had your classification, and that was quite an interesting experience from what kind of the process was, and sort of like you're kind of, they're testing your limits, and then you've got a competition to do in the back of it, and that's part of your your classification process, or it is for Maria's class. So that is quite a learning curve. But I think always I've tried to emphasize that it's your performance and nobody else's performance on the day that matters, and sort of your preparation to that. And I guess it is challenging when suddenly someone turns up that you've never heard of, because they've just been classified, or they've come down a class, or whatever. It kind of changes the field. But I think, and parasport, even I guess like in the short amount of time that I've been involved as a coach, I've noticed a bit of a difference in terms of like the opportunities. Like there's a couple of opportunities at the Grand Prix that I think have been really great for exposure, but also the introduction of the sort of the junior championships for parasport, I think will make a huge difference. Like I genuinely think I went to my first sort of major champs, or as an under 23. Like I can't imagine being 14 and sort of going to these level of events, and and I think that journey for Maria is like what people would maybe make sort of much later on in their career, sort of late teens up to into your 20s. Maria did that at 14. So I think in terms of, I guess, longevity of like a para athlete's sort of development, I think having that junior experience is sort of a stepping stone. So you suddenly don't just go from competing at a local open graded to a world championship or a European championship. Can is just a huge, like I just can't get my mind around how you go from one extreme to another. And I think, that probably is, kind of, some of the, I guess, challenges Maria's faced recently has probably come from that sort of really sharp transition, actually sort of, the one, the expectation and the pressure that, you maybe have around you, and you put on yourself as well, but it's because you've kind of been there at the, the world record stage, and, the world championships, the Paralympic games, and everything else at such a young age and so quickly. And I think, sort of as parasport develops, and particularly in athletics, like that sort of development stage, I think will really help other athletes coming through the pathway as well.
I suppose one source of continuity, Maria, is probably that although you've come up through these stages very quickly, you've now been in the sport a long time. Is the Scottish para community quite a close-knit one? Have you presumably been seeing a lot of the same people from Scotland at these competitions over the years? Is there always sort of that nice kind of sense that you know one another and you've competed together over time?
Yeah, no, it's nice, especially there's a good core of us on the GB team. So we've known each other for a few years, so it's nice to have a familiar face and somebody that actually understands what you're saying. So no, there's it's nice because it's not just like a small number. There's a few of us who get to compete. So no, it's a good wee support system that we have along with the others on the team.
Great. And what would you say your motivation is now, Maria? Having achieved so much already, what is it that keeps you turning up and keeps you fresh and keeps you working hard?
Actually, I enjoy training and I enjoy keeping fit. So I feel like even if I wasn't competing, I would still be happy to train and stuff, just because it's something I do enjoy. And I probably now being in a better mental space, I'd actually like to see how I would perform in the higher levels of competition. So that's something else that's keeping me motivated. But just the actual enjoyment of training and being a part of a training group is something that keeps me motivated.
Great. And Jamie, just in terms of your journey as a coach, still a relatively young coach, how has moving into coaching changed the way that you see the sport as a whole?
I guess it's quite an interesting one, because I guess when you're an athlete, you're kind of very stuck on the here and the now. You kind of maybe you have that longer aim, whether that's a games or a championships, and that focus probably doesn't go much farther than 4 years, but you're probably still very much in the here and the now. This is how the training session feels now. This is how yesterday felt. This is how I'm going to feel tomorrow. And it's quite hard to kind of move out that here and the now. Whereas, I guess as a coach, you're kind of got that helicopter view of, right, this is where we want to get to. And that, that's probably, when I first actually sat down with Maria, we were talking about Tokyo, we were, talking that far in advance. And actually sort of, that was our working goal, and sort of I'm working back from there. So I say, probably you kind of appreciate the whole journey, and you can actually see the journey. And I guess that's probably the biggest change for me, is instead of being focused so here and now as an athlete, I'm actually, okay, this is the whole journey, this is where we need to get to. So when days don't go so well, or sessions aren't actually completed, or we have to adapt because of this, I'm kind of a little bit more relaxed about it, because I'm yeah, but this is only one day in the whole training block. We've got another 6 weeks to work on this or whatever. Whereas as an athlete, I think I would probably be quite frustrated by actually, that didn't go so well, or oh gosh, there's snow on the track, or it's too cold to do this session. What does that mean? So I'm probably a little bit more mellow and relaxed as a coach than I was as an athlete.
And I think incorporating para-athletes into wider training groups, I think, is something that we're starting to see more athletics clubs do, and to kind of overcome maybe that initial fear gap, that is this something we can do? What would you say, presumably those core coaching skills are absolutely transferable, whether you're looking to athletes who are a race runner or para sprinters or all sorts of different disciplines? There's a lot of commonality there, presumably.
Yeah, I think, I've become far more creative in my coaching from coaching para than I think I ever would have been. You know, just it really, you have to reflect more and think more about, oh, actually, this is not like Maria's physically not able to do this, but we want the same stimulus, whether that's, you know, in terms of like a muscle group when we're in the gym, or whether that's stimulus in terms of like actual energy systems that we're trying to train. So you kind of have to think about actually doing stuff a little bit differently. And you have to, you know, sort of, I think the communication skills are super important, and probably with Maria's impairment is about actually the visual, is just, you know, sort of like seeing the breakdown in techniques and just sort of being, I think, you know, when I first started coaching Maria and sort of I was very cautious, and actually, oh, okay, actually she's fatiguing too much, and sort of the technique was breaking down, and so actually we call it in there. And now I think I've found that balance between actually sort of actually understanding when our CP is becoming problematic in terms of our training, and then actually, you know, sort of stopping it there, but actually still sort of training and finding the stimulus that we're looking for in the session. So yeah, I think it's just, you know, it's just the extra creativity, the communication, and you know, a lot of the sessions that Maria does is you know, quite similar to everyone else in the group. But you know, we've just, you know, we have a Zoom session, and you know, we're all doing core and stuff like that just now, and it's actually just like, okay, Maria, you're going to have to adapt this a little bit, you know, whether that's, you know, like, you know, feet on the ground, or actually you go into this position and everyone else is still doing the same sort of kind of style of exercise. So it's just, you know, kind of creating, and it's not being scared to make it a little bit different. It's making it, you know, like, I guess a little bit more accessible, or actually making sure it's you know, working the right areas still, just by tweaking the technique a little bit or tweaking the exercise.
And Maria, Jamie mentioned that you find a lot of this technical stuff quite fascinating yourself, and in fact you're now studying sports coaching at university. I think that presumably that it's something that you want to move on to later in life, is it?
Yeah, no, it's something. I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to stuff. I like to understand how it all works, and actually enjoy like learning about it. I think for me, I can understand, for me to be able to understand, so then I can like make my limbs work. In terms of like what I would like to do in the future, I don't actually think I want to do hands-on coaching as like a job. It's more something I'd maybe do on the side, but I'd quite be interested to work within like a governing body and looking at how we can improve things for up and coming athletes and make the system better. But it's something I'm interested in. I do a bit of coaching for race runners, so we've got a race running group in East Lothian. So I've been doing a bit of that. That just started up before the whole coronavirus. So that's a bit of a shame we haven't done too much of that. But I'd definitely like to get some coaching qualifications so I can perhaps help out the club, because that's something I enjoy doing.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both very much for joining us. It's really interesting to speak to you, and yeah, all the best. We look forward to seeing what comes next.